Wir fangen jetzt gleich an. Good afternoon and welcome to the SETA Berlin web panel. My name is Zafer Mesher. Over the next 60 minutes, we will examine the central strategic question of our moment with NATO, whether the transatlantic relationship is being anchored or set adrift in a shifting global order. The pressures on the relationship rarely converge as they do now. Global power is diffusing toward Asia. Russia has returned as a structural challenger. The United States, under the second Trump administration, has redefined its posture towards Europe. European defense is being recalibrated after the NATO commitment to 5%. The question is no longer whether the transatlantic bonds will continue. The question is on what foundations it will continue and with what internal geometry. What still anchors the relationship? Where are the lines of drift? We'll extend this across three dimensions. The first is the American recalibration. The second is the European response, the polar now being constructed inside the alliance. The third is the alliance's wider geometry in a multipolar age with particular attention to Türkiye. I'm very pleased to be joined for this conversation by Professor Ulrich Schlie. Professor Schlie holds the Henry Kissinger Professorship for Security and Strategy Research at the University of Bonn. He also directs the Center for Advanced Security, Strategic and Integration Studies. Before his academic appointment in 2020, he served for 27 years in the German Foreign Service. From 2005 to 2012, he was director of the planning staff at the Federal Ministry of Defense.
Ich fürchte, ich kann nichts hören hier. I'm afraid I can't hear your voice. I think there's a technical problem.
Oh.
Should I leave and come back again?
Kannst du mich hören? İbrahim burada mısın?
Hocam duyuyorum ama.
Yes, I can now hear you.
So it's a problem if you
Can you hear me
cannot
right now?
hear me, of course. Your micro it's active. Can you check your mic whether it's on? You can see me, but you cannot hear me. İbrahim, müsait misin sen?
Hocam yani bekliyorum ama ne yapacağımı bilmiyorum açıkçası.
Duyamıyoruz ya, görebiliyoruz. Bizi duyamıyor. Yani benim konuşmamı duyamıyor. Was ist denn mit deinem Mikro? Ist an?
So can you hear me?
Wahrscheinlich, du kannst uns, glaube ich, nicht hören. Ich rufe dich mal an. Telefonda da mobil box'u çıkıyor. Abi ne Hi Allah, ja. Ibrahim,
So, jetzt ist es besser. Can you hear me right now?
hören?
Jetzt höre ich dich, ja.
Ja,
Vorhin hatte ich dich
klasse.
auch gehört. Ja.
Okay. Ja gut, dann fangen wir am besten von vorne an.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Good.
your patience.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. We will start again from the scratch. So, good afternoon and welcome to the SETA Berlin web panel. My name is Mesha. Over the next 60 minutes, we will examine the central strategic questions of our moment with NATO, whether the transatlantic relationship is being anchored or set adrift in a shifting global order. The pressure, better says, the pressures on the relationship rarely converge as they do now. Global power is diffusing toward Asia. Russia has returned as a structural challenger. The United States, under the second Trump administration, has redefined its posture toward Europe. European defense is being recalibrated after the Hague commitment of NATO to 5%. The question is no longer whether the transatlantic bond will continue. The question is on what foundations it will continue and with what internal geometry. What still anchors the relationship? Where are the lines of drift? We will examine this across three dimensions. The first is the American recalibration. The second is the European response and the pillar now being constructed inside the alliance. The third is the alliance's wider geometry in a multipolar age, with particular attention to Türkiye. I'm very pleased to be joined for the conversation by Professor Ulrich Schlie. Professor Schlie holds the Henry Kissinger Professorship for Security and Strategy Research at the University of Bonn. He also directs the Center for Advanced Security, Strategic and Integration Studies. Before his academic appointment in 2020, he served for 27 years in the German Foreign Service from 2005 to 2012. He was director of the planning staff at the Federal Ministry of Defense. He worked with three ministers of defense, Franz Josef, Theodor Gutenberg, and Thomas de Maizière. He has held visiting positions at Harvard Tufts Science School, the Institut d'études politiques de Paris, and the NATO Defense College in Rome, and currently holds a joint research professorship at the University of St. Andrews. He is a leading voice in the current debate on the transatlantic dimension of European security. Professor Schlie, welcome. It is a privilege to have you with us.
Thank you for your kind introduction and good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to have that exchange and I'm much looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. Let us begin with the American question. The second Trump administration has framed the transatlantic relationship in transactional terms. Its national security strategy assigns Europe primary responsibility for conventional defense. It declares that NATO is no longer an ever-expanding alliance. It foregrounds competition with China as the strategic horizon. Bad news for Europe with the consequences, as we can see, there is a shift from burden sharing to burden exclusively for its own continent and for the European Union. Professor Schlie, is this a temporary disturbance, a generational recalibration, or a structural realignment in American foreign policy? And how should... Hello?
No, please go ahead.
And how should European allies read this positioned differently along the transatlantic axis, please?
Thank you. I think you asked the central question. What is the change about? Is it habit or is it fundamental change? And I think it's a fundamental change. It's a new approach. We have seen several elements of it already in the first Trump administration, but this time it even goes beyond what we have seen there. Trump looks at the world and America's role in the world from a cost-benefit analysis. He is eager to bring the Europeans to the table in terms of spending more money for our common defense. He has reshaped the North Atlantic Alliance. This is the better part of the news. He even succeeded in what several administrations failed, that the Europeans deliver more. Recall the speech, the farewell speech, the then Secretary of State Robert Gates gave in Brussels when he attacked heavily the Europeans. This is more than 13 years past, but now we see that the Europeans deliver. The second part of the answer is that Trump seems to have no doubts or hesitations to risk the future of the Atlantic Alliance. It is even now imaginable that Trump decides that America has to leave this most successful alliance, and that is the core of a defining moment. I think Europe has missed many buses in the past, but now they see that they are under tremendous pressure to bring more to the table, to deliver. And at the same time, we must take care that the alliance, as I said, which is the most successful alliance after the Second World War, should not be demolished. I think it's a defining moment.
Well, thank you, Professor Schlie. What I compelling in your reading is how Trump has shaped so far the NATO within a short term, I think it is can be connected with the question as well. Does the centrality of China in US strategy reshape how Europe should think about its own deterrence when we look further? Professor Schlie.
This question also has two elements. The first is that the Europeans undoubtedly must step up. The old saying, more bang for the buck, is still valid. So Europe must end its sleep over European security, adapt, but Rome was not built in one day, so it needs time. And the question is, with a leaving or with a withdrawal of the United States next year, or probably in 2028, Europe would not be in a position to replace the United States in terms of Atlantic alliance. And there's much about a European pillar. But as I can assure you, there is no real European pillar in NATO. What we definitely must see is a stronger European contribution to the North Atlantic Alliance. But the main thing, the main purpose is to preserve the alliance and to convince Trump that it's in his own interest to stay in the alliance. When we look at the forthcoming summit in Angora, then I think it's important that we will at the end be satisfied with the results and can call it a success. There is nothing as successful as the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli said in 1870 than the success. And success is the preservation of the alliance, a stronger European contribution, but also an undoubted American commitment to NATO. And this is my main concern at the moment, whether we will see that. An American commitment means that the United States will stay within the alliance, and also that we make sure that the European side and the American side will be bridged by common objectives and also further capabilities and stronger European contributions.
Okay. This for the first pillar of the topic, my last question: is there a usable historical analogy like Nixon's years of the Mansfield Amendments, or are we in genuinely new territory?
When you go back in the history of the alliance, you will recall several moments where we had, I would call it, fierce debates on burden sharing between the Americans and the Europeans. And there had been a lot of pressure. And I recall the debates in the 1960s when it was not clear how to proceed with the nuclear deterrence, the so-called MLF debate caused dramatic reactions in membership countries. But the approach Trump has chosen is, for the first time since the end of World War II, a purely cost-benefit approach. And I think this is something which cannot be compared to the change we have seen in 1980 after the end of the Carter era when Ronald Reagan came to power. It cannot be compared to Nixon's approach or to Truman's policy in the Cold War. Perhaps the situation in which we find ourselves can be compared with the situation of 1945, when an old order faded away and something new developed, which had no name at the time. And we have to be very, very careful about the consequences of these power shifts. We have to be very, very careful. What does that mean for our countries, for Turkey, for Germany, for France? And this is the explanation why so many think that the current world state is in a kind of limbo. And that makes it far more complicated, because everyone has vested interest, but also common interests. And I think, again, the main objective should be to convince Trump that it is in the American interest to preserve what has been so successful in the past.
Okay, so thanks for the first dimension, the American question. Now we have to talk about, of course, the European question. It's the second dimension, or web panel. So, of course, it brings us to the European response with the pillar being constructed inside the alliance. The NATO summit at Hague with the Hague commitment to 5% of GDP by 2035 is the most consequential European response to the new American posture, as you also mentioned. But spending is only one element. The European pillar is also being built through its own security architecture, SAFE program, PESCO, the European Defence Fund, and a growing network of bilateral and unilateral initiatives. Professor Schlie, what kind of alliance is being constructed inside the alliance? And what is the political theory underpinning it? You know, and strategic, is it strategic autonomy, complementary capability, or a hedge against transatlantic uncertainty?
Thank you for your question. The first message is that Europe should step up, bring more to the table, develop capabilities which the European armies do not have at the very moment. Europe has been very good in debates which led nowhere. I recall the debate on strategic autonomy. I would not exaggerate this in apostrophes ideological approach. It would be better to have a pragmatic approach and to make sure that whatever the Europeans do does serve the common purpose of the alliance. I think it would be an unwise strategy to challenge America in this particular historical situation. The defense fund PESCO you mentioned, that has been developed in another political environment, and now there is a concern which I see for quite some time. The European Commission is a bureaucracy, and they are able to spend money, but they are not able to generate political will. The question of the political will is one of the leaders of the heads of state and government in European member countries. And European means European members of the North Atlantic Alliance. You know that in the construction of the European Union, there are even some new like Ireland or Austria. And there have been in the past many debates whether NATO should be in line with EU and so on. I think the pressure is now so demanding that we should leave aside these debates and concentrate on strengthening the North Atlantic Alliance. It would be a misunderstanding to think that the European Union can replace NATO or build up an own European NATO. Also, I think this leads us nowhere.
I see. Well, building on your reading, the European pillar is being constructed asymmetrically, and within the European Union framework, SAFE and PESCO define a regulatory and financial architecture. That architecture increasingly determines what counts as European defense. Allies outside the EU framework, the United Kingdom, for example, Norway, Canada, Türkiye, are not simply spending more. They are being categorized differently in the alliance industrial and procurement logic. This asymmetry contains a paradox, the same autonomy that now defines European ambition has been practiced by Türkiye for nearly a decade. Türkiye's defense industry trajectory, its operational reach, its willingness to operate outside dominant Western templates, these are precisely the qualities European policy now seeks to cultivate, I would say. My question is whether can the European pillar be built coherently while keeping its most adaptive non-European Union allies at a structural distance? And does the current moment offer an opening to rethink that,
So I share your deficit analysis, and I think this, what you mentioned, is a good example why Europe has not stepped up so far. There is a tendency of a bureaucracy to solve problems with the same methods as they applied in the past. And it's now a political decision to have more flexibility in all these questions. And I think it does not serve the purpose when Turkey or the United Kingdom cannot fully bring to the table what they would like to bring to the table. And there should be a broader definition of European interest. We all sit in the same boat.
Right.
And I see there the when you define the homework, I see in the first place the European Union just to have to develop more flexible instruments and to make sure that the political disappointment which is caused by a too rigorous approach to these questions will lead to further problems. As I said, and I repeat that point, is we don't have the time to wait another decade. It's now high time to act.
Right. I would be interested to know where does the German position of the German government, what is the German government's position currently, including third states into SAFE as participants? What is the position of Chancellor Merz, for example?
As far as as far as I'm informed, and I'm currently not a member of the German Defense Administration. My experience refers to the past, but I was involved in developing these instruments, and I very much tried to push in the direction to have a larger flexibility to include third state countries in order to strengthen the elements. So it would always be my advice to go in this direction.
I see. I mean, with the European Defense Fund, there is a critical issue, as you may know.
Yeah.
Is intended for capability development, and in terms of industrial capabilities, And I mean, when we look at the almost the cancellation of the FCAS project, and we know why, because there is a huge competition between industries, for example, France and Germany. The question is it very efficient capability development project, the European Defense Fund, or has it become primarily an industrial protection mechanism and competition?
That's in theory a question, but in practice, it always develops in the direction you described. And this is the point where the policymakers should come in. I think it's what is in our interest. In our interest is not to serve the interest of players from industry, but we do have a common political vision, and therefore the policymakers should intervene and readapt the instruments. I mean, these instruments are not untouchable, holy results. So these instruments should serve the political purpose, and it's in our common objective to strengthen the European, and as I declared, in my view, European means not strictly limited to members of the European Union. I think we should take as a starting point the composition of NATO, and I think exactly, I fully understand the background of your question, but I think this is a good point where the bilateral political relationship between our two countries can initiate further changes of instruments in Brussels. But it's not an easy play. You know, whenever you bring something in Brussels to the table, there will be opposition. But as I said earlier, new realities demand new ways of thinking, and therefore the current thinking in Brussels also needs some adaptation.
By the way, I mean, we have also NATO's its own defense industrial production action plan, you know, and how does it cope with the European Union instruments? Is it complementary or compelling, or what do you? I have less knowledge on that. That's it's a real question of knowledge.
I give an annual assessment in the yearbook of the European integration on the relationship between NATO and EU. And when you look there, much has been improved in the last couple of years. But your question is exactly pointing to a shortcoming. We do not have as a political reality, when you look to the defense planning mechanism and the defense planning system, we have a very elaborated defense planning process in NATO, and we do not have the same in the European Union. And I think there is a mismatch. But in an ideal world in which we do not find ourselves, it should be fully complementary.
Right. Fine. And now, since we discussed about the European question, so it is the next is in the logical chain. You know, when we talk about the security architecture of Europe, we saw SAFE and the PESCO and the European fund, etc. And now we have to, I think, think about how cope NATO members in Europe who are not a member of the European Union, and how to at what extent and how we can integrate these countries. It's as we mentioned before, Great Britain, Norway, Türkiye. So my question in that context is that I mean, I looked at your assessment of Türkiye in the North Atlantic Alliance. There was a chapter 2021, and it's the title is Turkey and the North Atlantic Alliance, something you wrote, 21, a balance sheet and perspective offered a balanced assessment that resisted both excessive criticism and uncritical endorsement. 5 years later, after what you wrote at those times, several of the dynamics you identified have intensified, I would say. Turkey's defense industrial base is more developed. Its foreign policy posture is more independent. Russian and Iranian pressures now cross multiple theaters simultaneously, and the regional environment connects the Black Sea, the eastern flank approaches, and the MENA periphery as one strategic space. When we look at all actors who have their influence in all these 3 areas, and within the broader pattern of regional contributors, the North in the high north, Poland and the Baltic states on the eastern flank, Italy and Spain on the southern flank. How do you read Turkey's position today?
Well, when you look at Turkey's position from a strategic perspective, it has undoubtedly increased in value for the alliance. As we have seen in the last 5 years, so many developments in the Mediterranean, but also in the Middle East, which is called Near East, not because it's near to the United States, but it's next to Europe. I think we have seen developments which underline a greater fragmentation of the world in which we live. So the strategic value of regional powers has increased, and it's an environment where we still have rising uncertainties. This strategic weight is reflected in the role within NATO. I think it's a perfect choice that the next summit will take place in Ankara, because this underlines that we from Western Europe, from Central Europe, must spend and give more emphasis to these developments on the southeastern flank of NATO. So I see an increase. We did not mention so far the war between Russia and Ukraine, and we did not touch upon the developments in the Middle East. And all these developments underline that we not only should invest in our ability to defend ourselves, Article 5, but also to the value of diplomacy. And there Turkey is a front runner in terms of bringing diplomatic offers to the table. Sometimes, and this is not a critical a statement containing criticism, quite the contrary, also for vested interest. But we desperately need more diplomacy. That war between Ukraine and Russia, which is the consequence of the Russian invasion, we should not forget that. But it would be in the interest of all to end this war very, very soon. And there we need mediation. And Turkey is in a position to mediate. But it's also in a position to strengthen the inner cohesion in the alliance, and not to be led by other second thoughts.
Well, Turkey's evolution since 2016 has too often been described in Western analytical framework as drift. I would propose a different reading, for sure. It is a form of strategic adaptation, I would say, to precisely global order shift that now drive the broader European autonomy debate. Consider what Turkey contributes to the alliance today. It is the second largest military NATO. Its defense industrial base is among the most dynamic in the alliance. Its military engagement and operational footprint connects the Black Sea, the eastern flank approaches, and the MENA periphery as no other ally can. And its diplomatic agility, as you described just some minutes ago, they have stalled, they produced the opening, its diplomatic has produced openings where Western frameworks have stalled: the Black Sea grain corridor, the early Russian-Ukraine talks in Istanbul, mediation efforts in Syria and Libya, in Somalia and Sudan, part of conflict resolution over there. I mean, in a multipolar age, this combination is not an exception to the alliance. It is structural function the alliance increasingly depends on. My question: what would it like? What would it take, likely, conceptually and politically, for that anchoring role to be more fully recognized in NATO's strategic concept, in its regional plans, and in the political discourse of the major European capitals?
Thank you. May I recall that when you look at the structural questions, the positioning, also yes, the command structures of NATO, and also of the personnel, I think Turkey is very well recognized and represented within NATO, and I can congratulate Turkish diplomacy on the successes. I recall the debates when we discussed personnel questions of Turkish representation at several summits. When it comes to the strategic concept of 2022, you are right that it has to be adapted in several points, but it's not so easy a process, especially when you have to come to terms with an administration which is not so clear about, I mean the American administration, which is not so clear about the end state. And I think the prediction is somewhat justified to say that we do not expect a new strategic concept right now. That would be, as an exercise, a very demanding exercise. So the strategic weight, when I answer your question, whether the strategic weight could be made clearer of Turkey in the current alliance, then I think the final documents of the forthcoming summit will reflect that. But I would not go as far and demand for a new strategic concept. I think what is currently needed is a successful summit with a clear message of unity, with a clear message of a stronger European contribution to the alliance, and also with a clear message to Russia and to other threats of our common security.
Thank you, Professor Schlie.
Thank you for your...
Yeah, but let me ask you, since I have you at my web panel, so I try to get the maximum from you. So my question, it's the final stage now. I have 2-3 questions with short answers. Maybe then we will finalize our web panel. Where do you see the most plausible scenario for transatlantic vision over the next 5 years? Anchored, partially adrift, or fundamentally restructured?
It will be transformed, a new NATO, hopefully with more inner cohesion, a stronger European contribution, and still in the own interest and American commitment. A kind of, if I may use that phrase from Zbigniew Brzezinski, a kind of World Wide Web for security.
Ah, cool. And what signals would suggest that the European pillar is moving toward inclusion of its non-EU allies rather than away from?
A common understanding of security, where we hopefully would look less at questions of EU or non-EU membership, but where we bring to the table to the alliance whatever it takes from the European side, and less theoretical debates, and more practical commitments and a common spirit.
Right. Thank you. And before we really finally close the web panel, I would like to ask each of us, I will ask myself and I will ask you to name a single variable to watch in the months ahead. Not a prediction, a question that the period to come will help us answer. My variable is whether the European pillar is built in ways that hold its most adaptive non-EU allies at structural distance, or when the political conversation begins to open. Even small movements in that conversation would, according to my understanding, would signal that the categorical question we discussed here is beginning to shift towards anchor and not anchor, but not adrift should be now option for the take of a robust autonomy. So what would be your variable?
My under the assumption that we have rising strategic uncertainties, wars to come, divides, domestic European problems, I would put all eggs in the basket of solidarity. I think when we concentrate on our alliance solidarity and what has been achieved in the past, we should be quite optimistic that we even can come to terms with ourselves and leave aside all these theoretical debates which lead to a weakening of our institutions. My message is, let's work together to preserve the alliance as such, as the most successful alliance in history after World War II.
Well, it's a great sentence, which should be, according to my understanding, should be the final message of our web panel. Professor Schlie, thank you
Thanks
very
so
much
for your interest, and I wish you and everyone who watched and listened a good day and looking forward to seeing you soon in Ankara or Istanbul or wherever. Thank you so much.
Hopefully. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also
Thank
to
you.
our audience, our recording of this session along with a short analytical brief will be available on the SETA website in the days following. Forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor
Goodbye.
Schmidt. Thank you.